Hey, are we forgiven as we forgive those who trespass against us? Do we forgive our debts as our debts are forgiven from us? In Matthew 18, Jesus was teaching some of his disciples about the importance of forgiveness. Peter, who seemed to have a knack for saying the wrong thing, asked Jesus, when someone sins against me, how many times should I forgive him? Up to 7 times? Jesus' response was, no, Peter. Let's notch that number up a bit and say 70 times 7. Then to illustrate to Peter and to us, Jesus shared the parable of the unmerciful servant. It's about a king who wants to settle his account with a man who owed him 10,000 talents. I think that's a large amount of money. It was an unpayable amount of money. And remember, this parallels with how should we forgive sin. Large amount of money, large amount of sin. There was no way the man could pay it. Even selling the man, the wife, his kids into slavery would only scratch the surface, paying for this large debt. And the debt was a debt. That's what the king ordered. The servant got down on his knees and he begged for an extension. Give me more time to pay the bill. And amazingly, the king responded by not giving him more time, but he forgave the entire debt. It was amazing, because it was such a large debt, paralleled with a large sin. The king entirely forgave it. Servant, his life, his family, they were spared. Then he ran across a friend who owed him just a small amount, small sin. It wasn't no big deal to a man who had been forgiven so much. But somehow the concept of forgiveness going both ways didn't click with this man. And he threw his friend in jail until he could pay up. Didn't give the man any grace. No extra time. No mercy. No forgiveness. It was as if the king had forgotten how he had been forgiven. As if it never had happened. So when the king found out, how do you think he responded? The servant that had been forgiven so much ended up in jail with orders to torture him till he would pay. Which was, about as easy for him to do as flattening a mountain with a teaspoon. It's interesting that this parable is found only in Matthew. And what was Matthew before he became a disciple. He was a tax collector. He had heard every excuse that could be given for not being able to pay the Romans. You pay up or you went to prison, or worse. When Matthew heard Jesus tell this story, it touched him deeply. He made sure he recorded it. In Jesus' parable, there were some other people who were touched by this, people who heard it, people who were friends of both of the servants, the ones that were forgiven by the king. But they saw his lack of forgiveness. The one that was forgiven, they saw his lack of forgiveness to his fellow servant. That someone had received such a forgiveness now suddenly was void of grace, had none to share. They were shocked. These things happen today? Yeah, I think they do. Each of us have sinned. Each of us have been sinned against. We've been hurt. Some of us have been treated terribly. Some of us so deeply that we can't forget. They may have left us with scars for the rest of our life. And that may be exactly what we have done to others. And yet, out of love for us, God offers us full forgiveness. It's not something we deserve, which is why we call it grace. It's why it's so amazing. Each of us can hear the pronouncement of forgiveness on Sunday or any other day when we hear preachers. We're thrilled. Then we move on in our lives. And we're challenged by Christ in His Lord's Prayer to deal with each that have sinned against us in the same way that God has dealt with us, with forgiveness, with grace, and with mercy. And you know, this is where it gets tough. This is where far too many good Christians fail to put their grace into action, or fail to put grace into action. Preferring instead to take up sides, to carry grudges, or even to get even. And should we have been forgiven and even forgotten, our sins forgotten, when we hold grudges, try to get even. This is where our witness to the world loses its appeal. Why, the world asks, are you talking about forgiveness when you haven't learned how to forgive? Just something to think about there. Thanks for watching if you watched.